We're looking live inside dueling House committee rooms as the battle rages over the new GOP health care bill. The divide setting up what could be a nasty fight that our Capitol Hill producers are telling us could continue deep into the evening, maybe until the sun comes up. I'm Shannon Breman for Martha McCallum on day 48 of the first 100. The backlash only growing stronger from the conservative wing of the Republican Party, as the American Health Care Act finds itself in what's known as these markup sessions, where lawmakers can offer up changes and amendments. Some of those changes may be necessary, as today was full of back and forth between the White House and Capitol Hill.
Are we going to do what we said we would do? Are we going to repeal and replace Obamacare with something better? This is the covenant that we made with the American people when we ran on a repeal and replace plan in 2016.
We're designing a system that is not going to lower costs, and that's the big deal.
By removing the mandate of a government mandated, you must buy this program or you will pay a penalty, and eliminating choice, we are enacting, I think, very strong conservative values in health care that give all Americans more choice at a lower cost. So I think that should be a very positive message. Make no mistake, the president is very proud of the product that we have produced. We are out in full sell mode.
We're going to try to make this bill better if we can, but right now, where it is, it's not what we told the voters we were going to do.
Tonight, as President Trump finds himself in sell mode, we'll dive deep into the divisions inside this debate. David McIntosh, president of the Club for Growth, is here. He just met with the president within the last hour. He's going to tell us whether he was convinced by Mr. Trump's pitch. Then, Governor Rick Scott, hot off meetings both with the HHS Secretary Tom Price and Speaker Paul Ryan, is here to tell us why he thinks the bill is a good start. But we begin with Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel live on the Hill. Hi, Mike.
Well, hi, Shannon. Yeah, it's been a long day for lawmakers and the two relevant committees getting a first crack at this Republican health care package. This hour, lawmakers in the House Energy and Commerce Committee continue the work on this bill. Democrats have accused their Republican colleagues of trying to rush the bill through before they've gotten an assessment of the price tag and overall impact from the Congressional Budget Office.
My inquiry is, again, if I can state it, if you'll let me state it, is that after the last 2 months of repeatedly saying we were going to use regular order, that we were not going to try to jam things down, the members
gentlemen have a parliamentary inquiry.
Now you are proceeding to do exactly that. Okay.
So what's your inquiry?
There's also the fight among Republicans. Some conservatives came out strongly against the package yesterday. Last night, President Trump tweeted that he feels sure his friend Senator Rand Paul will come along with this new and great health care program, and the senator offered this response.
I do agree with the president, and I talked to him this week. I agree that Obamacare is a disaster, and I agree that we should repeal it. And so I think that's where the unity is, and then, we're going to have a debate over replacement.
Fox News has confirmed in the House Republican Conference meeting, Whip Steve Scalise today asked members if they're with the president on health care or with House Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi.
I think they should be with their constituents, and their constituents have a lot to lose if they go along with this. It's interesting to see the figures of the people who supported President Trump who are on the Affordable Care Act.
White House officials say the president is in sell mode, and many sources up here on Capitol Hill say that will be critical to getting this done. Part of that charm offensive is expected to include Budget Director Mick Mulvaney inviting members of the Conservative Freedom Caucus to the White House next Tuesday night for a little pizza and bowling. Shannon?
Bit of a bowling summit. All right, Mike, thank you very much for the update. Joining us now, David McIntosh, president of the Club for Growth, who yesterday called the GOP health care bill a, quote, warmed over substitute for government-run health care. Now, he just met with the president, so did his pitch work, the president's, or David's? Let's find out. Welcome. How did the meeting go? There's been no secret that you've been a big critic.
Right. No, and we shared those concerns, criticisms of the bill with the president. I can say I was encouraged because he was listening. Yes, he was selling. He said, we've got to get something done. I'm pushing you and the Congress to get a bill through so that we can repeal Obamacare. But we pointed out that the House bill isn't the best vehicle for doing that. They don't fully repeal Obamacare. They keep some of the taxes that he passed. They keep the expansion of Medicaid. And the worst thing for us is they don't create competition across state lines, so people will end up spending as much as they do now on their health insurance bills.
Yeah.
And the promises that Republicans made were, we're going to repeal it so there'll be competition, free market, and you can pay less and get better health care.
I know that you're not convinced this does that in any way.
No,
and a lot of people.
and the most encouraging thing, Shannon, was the president and his team said, yes, we get it. This bill needs to be changed. And so we encouraged them, go push them to change it. And then we want to work with you to pass a better bill.
Well, you mentioned selling across state lines. It's been something people have really been looking forward to. When the criticism first bubbled up, the president tweeted out, it's coming in phase 2 and 3. We're going to get to that. Are you confident that will happen? And also, we had on Congressman Kevin Brady, the chair of one of the committees that is tackling this right now. And I pressed him on whether or not they're going to let people make substantive amendments, because I know for you and for others that have real concerns, you want to know that that input is going to be taken. Are you convinced from your meeting with the president tonight those things will happen?
So I'm convinced the president's going to push for it. I am not convinced the House leadership is really taking input from conservatives. They haven't from the beginning, and that's the mistake they're making on this bill. I think what they should do is allow amendments to fully repeal Obamacare and then work from there to bring back a free market bill and process that will benefit all Americans, because health insurance will be cheaper and they won't have to have all of these constraints and mandates that the Obamacare bill does.
Well,
Keeping
David,
a lot of that is the big problem with the House bill that they're working on right now.
And it's got a price tag. We all know it's not free, but I want to quickly ask you, where do you come down on the issue of, we had Senator Lee on last night, Congressman Jim Jordan, they're talking about reintroducing the full Obamacare repeal that passed in 2015, which obviously President Obama didn't sign. Would you support that as a different vehicle?
So I think that's the one you could easily pass in both houses. Once they start making changes and Ryan starts adding things back into that look like Obamacare, then you start losing votes. So yes, I think that's a good starting place for them. Okay. I think they could take the Ryan Care bill and get rid of the changes that keep Obamacare provisions, and then the Ryan Care bill could be a good bill too. There are some good things in there that could move forward.
I see that you've adopted the moniker that a lot of folks out there who don't love the bill are now calling it Ryan Care. This morning we had a debate over calling it Trump Care. So we will see. But thank you for giving us some intel and insight into your meeting with the president, and keep us updated.
Yeah, I'm encouraged by the president pushing them to keep changing till they get a good bill and then send it to him.
Okay. David McIntosh, thanks.
Yeah.
Here now, Florida Governor Rick Scott, who met with HHS Secretary Tom Price over the weekend and Speaker Paul Ryan today. And Governor, I know you spent a lot of time meeting with the president one-on-one talking about this as well. What do you make of what we have so far? Is it workable? Is it a good foundation? Would you pass it as it's written now?
Well, Shannon, you know my background. I ran the largest hospital company in the country, and my family grew up without health care. So this is very important to me, and we know Obamacare is an absolute mess. The president inherited a mess. So I'm encouraged that we're having real conversations here. I'm going to fight to make sure it's fair to Floridians, but I'm encouraged that there's conversations, and I'm going to continue to work to make sure I want to make sure we get a bill that's fair to Floridians and make sure people have access to health care. Shannon, the problem here is costs are too high. So whatever we pass has to focus on cost.
Well, what do you say to those who they don't see any evidence in this bill that it actually changes or bends that cost curve down? They're not convinced.
Well, look, we've got to focus on costs. If you look at access is 100% tied to costs. If consumers can't afford health care, the companies can't, taxpayers can't, we're not going to fix health care. And that's my focus is. Now, on top of that, whatever we do, I've got to fight for Florida, and I'm going to.
Okay, let's talk about Medicaid, because Florida did not take the Medicaid expansion. That's one of the really hotly contested issues in all of this stew over health care. There are some senators who are conservative GOP senators who say, listen, if you don't keep the Medicaid expansion going, it's been critical in my state. You may lose my vote over this. There are conservatives who say, we don't even like that the Medicaid expansion is continuing for 3 years. Where do you come down on this? Because you made a very bold choice that you thought was the best for your state, and you've taken heat over it.
Sure. Well, look, we know that the way they've done Obamacare, it's not sustainable. Costs have gone up. Taxpayers are not going to be able to pay for it. It's caused all of our premiums to go up. So it's got to be repealed. But in the meantime, I've got to fight for Florida, and I'm going to fight for Florida to make sure it's fair to Florida. We didn't do the expansion because we knew it was not sustainable. So I've got to make sure that whatever passes is fair to our state. Now, I want people to get access to health care, but we've got to, like you said before, we've got to focus on the cost side.
Okay, so what about across state lines? Is that something you support?
Oh, absolutely. If you look at it, you want to drive down healthcare costs, allow people to buy whatever insurance they want, don't tell them what to buy, make sure you have more competition. Part of that is sell across state lines, and reward people for taking care of themselves. Those three things will drive down cost.
What do you make of the tax credits? People, conservatives especially, the Freedom Caucus and others say it's just another word for an entitlement, and that's not something they can vote for.
Well, here's what you have to remember. This is way better than Obamacare. With this bill, if this bill passes, it's way better than Obamacare. I think there's a lot of things we can improve on. I want people to have access to health care. I want them to be able to afford health care. So I think, this is a great starting point, and I know we're going to keep working on it.
All right, Florida Governor Rick Scott, always good to chat with you. Thank you, sir.
Bye, Shannon.
All right, breaking at this hour, the FBI on the hunt for a mole inside the CIA. As the nation's top spy agency makes a very rare statement about this latest massive leak of classified information. Ahead, former CIA contractor Dr. James Mitchell, the man who personally interrogated the mastermind of 9/11, on the danger these leaks pose to our nation. Plus, a California mother of two struck and killed by an intoxicated driver. We're now learning he was known to be in the country illegally, deported 5 times previously. We'll debate that case just ahead.
Knowing the history that he had with the DUIs and so forth, it was like a slap in the hand and sent back, and he came back, and it shouldn't have never been done like that.
Breaking tonight, U.S. intelligence officials confirming that the FBI is on the hunt for a mole inside the CIA. Less than 36 hours after WikiLeaks apparently exposed the secret cyber spying tools of the Central Intelligence Agency, the FBI launching an investigation to find the person who leaked the sensitive classified information as they search for the next Manning or Snowden. In moments, we're going to be joined by former CIA contractor Dr. James Mitchell, the man who personally interrogated 9/11 mastermind Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. But first, we begin with Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry live in Washington with new details. Hi, Ed.
Well, Shannon, good to see you. We're told that the leak involves the entire hacking capacity of the CIA. That sparked embarrassing revelations about how the agency has the capacity to break into our smartphones, can secretly turn smart TVs into microphones that record our conversations, and could actually kill someone by hacking into a car that's connected to the internet. Now, the CIA has just released a statement acknowledging this is a very damaging leak, of course, that could jeopardize American personnel and operations. The CIA also insisting while they have these tools, they are not using them to spy on Americans. A spokesman declaring, quote, "It is also important to note that the CIA is legally prohibited from conducting electronic surveillance targeting individuals here at home, including our fellow Americans, and the CIA does not do so. CIA's activities are subject to rigorous oversight to ensure they comply fully with U.S. law and the Constitution." Now, the White House, meanwhile, today also jumped into the fray.
We will go after people who leak classified information. We will prosecute them to the full extent of the law. This is playing with our nation's national security is not something that should be taken lightly under this administration.
Tech companies also scrambling tonight. Apple declaring about 80% of their users have the most updated operating system that fixes vulnerabilities, while Samsung simply said privacy is a top priority for them. As for the CIA hunt for the mole that you mentioned, an intelligence official tells our own Catherine Herridge there are 3 scenarios: an insider who's either an employee or a contractor, or a network cyber breach, or some combination of the two. Shannon?
All right, Ed Henry live in Washington. Thank you.
Thank you.
Here now, Dr. James Mitchell, author of Enhanced Interrogation: Inside the Minds and Motives of the Islamic Terrorists Trying to Destroy America. Doctor, thanks for being with us tonight.
Thank you for having me on.
Okay, so we understand that there is now officially a federal criminal investigation. How in the world do they go about tracking this down? I mean, I asked our inside research brain room team to tell them how many contractors are at the CIA. They couldn't break it down by CIA, but they said within the intelligence community as a whole, at least 27,000.
Well, your assumption is that it's a contractor, right? Because that's what it's been in the past, but it could be anyone. And the other question that you asked me about how they're going to go about tracking these folks down, I really don't think we should talk about that. At least people who know shouldn't be talking about that, because the very reasons that we don't want the hacking tools released is we don't want them to know the methods that we're going to use. But what we need to do is relentlessly hunt these folks down, because they are not just placing American personnel at risk, they're placing American lives at risk.
Okay, so if not a contractor, are you saying that maybe you do believe it was a cyber breach from outside, from maybe a foreign actor or state actor?
Well, it could be an employee. It could be a cyber breach. It could be a small band of people. One of the things that we've done in this country that disturbs me a little bit is we've romanticized this subculture of hackers to the point that they've become almost a tribe, where they've become cult heroes, and that the cool thing to do is to get into the hard places to get into, and then to sort of, you know, give people a peek into their underwear drawer, so to speak, right? And so that's somehow become a way of counting coup or taking scalps, and that's a problem. And particularly if it's an employee of the government or a contractor, or it's some sort of a breach, we need to find that, we need to find those people, and we need to stop them.
Who benefits from this?
Who benefits? Criminals benefit, terrorists benefit. I want you to imagine a situation in which, now they're talking about doing more releases, and if they release the source code, that is particularly dangerous, because not only would criminals have that, but the bad guys would have that as well. Every day somebody from Al-Qaeda and ISIS gets up and tries to figure out some way to kill Americans here in the United States. Imagine if they could launch a catastrophic attack simultaneously with some sort of cyber war weapon attack as well. It makes us incredibly vulnerable. A second side effect of this thing is, I know a lot of people have criticized me because of my involvement in interrogations. Well, one of the weird side effects of releasing this kind of information is you make people like me that much more necessary. Because we had these surreptitious, clandestine ways of getting information without directly questioning people. Now you've revealed all of that, and so it's going to be harder to do that, because they're going to protect themselves. And if they can go invisible, then they can plan attacks.
Yes or no, are you confident that our investigation launched by the FBI will find the person or persons responsible?
They will if they're not politically correct about it. You know, I know that there are those on the left and on the right who, like I said, glamorize these leakers like Snowden and Manning as if they were some kind of culture heroes or some sort of cult heroes. And I think that's a mistake. They're traitors. They should be treated like traitors, because it's not just the CIA personnel or the intelligence community personnel or the military personnel or our State Department people who are in danger. It is American lives and American citizens.
All right. Doctor, thank you very much for your insight. We appreciate it.
Thank you, ma'am.
All right, here now, Ari Fleischer, a former Bush White House press secretary, and Marie Harf, a former CIA officer and spokesperson and a Fox News contributor. Good to see you both.
Good to be here.
Okay, Marie, how do you begin to tackle this issue? Because now the CIA is having to talk about things, although they are not publicly confirming or denying the authenticity of this material. They're having to talk about sources and methods. Know that others are talking about it. Our enemies are seeing it. How do you stem the bleeding, essentially, at this point?
Well, it's a huge problem. And the CIA statement that you just read is an important one, because it made several points that Americans need to realize. Nothing in this set of documents that was put out talks about anything directed against Americans. It puts out information about activities that, quite frankly, we believe the CIA should be doing, going after terrorists, going after criminal drug gangs, going after people trafficking in persons. So there's nothing in this trove that was directed against Americans. That's important. But this also does an incredible damage to this country. You know, the doctor was absolutely right in your previous interview. The bad guys now have information about how we go after them. And that is a problem. And I have faith that the FBI and the intelligence community will find eventually whoever did this. And absolutely, this is a problem.
Well, and Ari, what concerns does it raise for our allies who shared classified information with us and count on us to be a partner against the bad guys?
Shannon, great question. When this happened, that's one of my first thoughts is for anybody who works with us, who says we can work with the Americans and trust the Americans because we know that we can put our lives in their hands. This makes them scratch their head and say, we want to work with the Americans, but is it safe for us to do so? Look, this is a calamity. And I think Dr. Mitchell made a very good point when he stated that we cannot celebrate the Edward Snowdens of the world. They are some of the lowest, most viable criminals. There is nothing lofty about what they are doing. They put our country at risk. They put Americans at risk. And they should not be celebrated. They need to be condemned. And one of the only things I really hope comes out of if President Trump can have some type of rapport with Russia is that they return Edward Snowden to us so he can go on trial and get what he deserves.
Maria, do you also think it's time for him to publicly renounce and call out WikiLeaks? Because, you know, he at one point said, I love WikiLeaks. I mean, he joked about it some on the campaign trail. He made comments. They are not doing things to benefit the United States of America. And a lot of people think we haven't done enough to go after them, to shut them down, to come up with real punishment for people who are feeding them information. What would you like to see from the White House on this?
Absolutely. I think a full denunciation of WikiLeaks. There were a lot of national security experts. You're absolutely right. Over the summer, over the course of the campaign, both Republicans and Democrats who were very uncomfortable with how Donald Trump embraced WikiLeaks because they were helping him politically with releasing Hillary Clinton's emails. WikiLeaks is an organization that had already done damage to the United States with the Chelsea Manning documents. They are an organization that is trying to undermine U.S. security. And I want the White House to come out and fully, criticize them, denounce them, and make clear that what they're doing is completely abhorrent, and they will find the source inside the government of these leaks. Absolutely.
And Ari, is this a golden opportunity now for the president to step out on this particular issue? I mean, you've been at the heart of communications out of the White House.
Yeah. The president's in a jam, and he put himself there on this issue. You know, this is the same president who called on Russia to release even more information to WikiLeaks. Look, I was always uncomfortable with Russia interfering in our election and finding WikiLeaks, a group that I think is notoriously terrible, to be the conduit for what he wanted to do. And it happened to benefit him, Donald Trump, politically. So that's a route that I think is closed to him, unfortunately, because of the choices he made earlier. But look, the WikiLeaks is not the issue here. The issue here are traitorous Americans who have done this. And I presume that they're Americans, but people who are associated contractors, employees of the CIA in most likelihood. And I'm stunned that this could happen twice, that it happened at the National Security Agency and then it happened here at the CIA. There's got to be a better way to protect our assets and our information. It bothers me from the inside that it could happen more than once.
Yeah, and WikiLeaks tweeted out today they've only released 1% of what they have from the CIA, so we will stand by. Ari, Marie, good to see you both.
Thanks.
Well, a story still breaking tonight that you will not want to miss. An alleged Iraqi insurgent entered the U.S. with a fake ID. Lawmakers now calling for an explanation as the shocking details unfold. We've got those just ahead. Plus, 2 unthinkable crimes allegedly at the hands of illegal immigrants, one involving a young man now charged in the gruesome decapitation of his own mother. The other claiming the life of a mother of 2 who was struck by an illegal immigrant who was driving allegedly under the influence. David Wall and Richard Fowler are here on those cases next. Developing tonight, 2 deeply disturbing stories impacting both coasts of the country, each shining new light on the issue of violent illegal immigrant crime. First, in California, where a Mexican immigrant who'd been deported 5 times now faces charges of manslaughter in a drunk driving crash that killed a mother of 2. The other in North Carolina, where a teenage illegal immigrant from Honduras faces first-degree murder charges for allegedly decapitating his own mother. Trace Gallagher has been following the chilling details in both cases. He joins us from our West Coast newsroom. Trace.
Hi, Shannon. Let's begin here in California, where 42-year-old Sandra Duran, just an hour after leaving church, was struck and killed in her car by a drunk driver. Police say the intoxicated driver, 45-year-old Estuardo Alvarez, was fleeing the scene of another traffic accident at a high rate of speed. And the reason this case is generating so much outrage is because since 1998, Alvarez had been deported 5 times and had been arrested in Los Angeles more than 5 times. Including for 2 previous DUIs, driving without a license, several charges of drug possession, and resisting arrest. Alvarez is now being held on $2 million bail. And if he were to be released, which is highly unlikely, immigration agents have issued a detainer to take him into custody. The family of Sandra Duran say they don't want this case to be used against illegal immigrants just trying to make a life, but they also believe California authorities share in the blame. Listen.
Knowing the history that he had with the DUIs and so forth. It was like a slap in the hand and sent back, and he came back, and it shouldn't have never been done like that.
Separately, 200 miles east of Charlotte, North Carolina, an illegal teenage immigrant from Honduras has been charged with killing his mother. Police say 18-year-old Oliver Funes decapitated his mom because he, quote, felt like it. When police arrived on scene, they spotted the suspect carrying both a butcher knife and his mother's head. His two younger siblings were inside the house unharmed at the time. Funes is a so-called dreamer protected under the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA. His attorney says that he has significant mental issues. Shannon.
All right, Trace, thank you very much for spelling out the details for us. Joining me now with more, David Wall, attorney and President Trump supporter, and Richard Fowler, senior fellow at New Leaders Council and Fox News contributor. Good to see you both.
Hi, Shannon. Good to see you, Shannon.
And interestingly enough, I mean, David and Richard, I'm sure you're aware of this too, that the victim in the drunk driving crash, her sister is an LAPD officer and said, not only are we grieving, I'm worried about how many other families this is going to happen to. David, is this the president's best argument on this issue?
Absolutely. And, the two public officials that owe that family an apology are Mayor Eric Garcetti of L.A. and LAPD Chief Charlie Beck, who have engineered this sanctuary city policy that allowed Mr. Alvarado to stay in L.A. when he was released from jail multiple times and to stay in L.A. after he returned to the United States after being deported 5 times. On top of that, we risk losing in L.A. County $3.4 billion with a B dollars of federal funding for this sanctuary city policy. And as far as the young monster who beheaded his mother, how do we know he wasn't adjudicated criminally insane in Honduras? We can't know that because when people crash the border, we can't vet them. We can't do a background check. That's why the wall is so necessary, and that's why Mr. Trump is so hot on getting it built.
But Richard, even the woman's family, the woman who was killed in the drunk driving crash, her father has said, I don't want her case to be used to hurt other people who are just coming to here in good faith. To be immigrants who need to make a living. They're desperate to escape their home countries. I mean, even he who just lost his daughter says he doesn't want this to, taint the entire conversation.
And that's what makes this issue so hard, Shannon. I mean, you think about stories like this, which are just devastating and depressing, and those folks shouldn't be in this country. But then you have stories like the case that was reported in the Miami Herald a couple weeks ago. James LaCrue, a Haitian national, came to America searching for economic freedom, and he's being deported because of minor traffic offenses, right? So we have both sides of this coin, and it's not working. And the reason why it's not working, Donald Trump, while I understand why he's putting this executive order forward, this is a stopgap measure. People in Congress, the President of the United States, they need to get bold and say we're going to actually have comprehensive immigration reform with a pathway to citizenship. Right now, America's operating on 1980 immigration laws, and the 1980s have called and they've asked for their laws back. We need new laws, we need modern laws, and now that Donald Trump has the White House, he has the Senate, and he has the House, let's get some comprehensive immigration reform done so we can fix these problems.
So Richard, though, you're okay with the temporary, we said we're on a temporary pause. So for some of this, you're okay with that because, we have a lot of issues with people who are in this country who are under investigation for potential terror ties. I mean, that's according to the FBI. But David, does this beg the question, as Richard said, like it's time to get something done on Capitol Hill that is going to be a more permanent solution? Will the parties get together on that?
Shannon, in 1986, Ronald Reagan passed the Amnesty Act. Everybody thought that was going to cure the problem. They said, look, we're going to give everybody amnesty, and after that, we're going to strictly enforce the border. Look what happened. It didn't work. The bottom line is we have immigration laws. We have people in Europe waiting in line for years to get into America, and we're saying, well, wait a second, everybody that sneaks up from the southern border, we have to make special accommodations for them just because. It doesn't work that way. But Mr. Trump is focusing right now on the hardest core criminals like Mr. Alvarado, who wouldn't have been here, by the way, if he hadn't been given sanctuary in this city, and if we had the president beforehand who would actually enforce the law.
We got to leave it there. But he was somebody who had previous drug charges and other drunk driving charges as well. So that is definitely one of the cases this administration says it's going to focus on. I know, Richard, you cited something else. There's a lot to be ironed out here. We thank you both for coming on today.
Thanks,
There is. Thanks. Up next, a story that's still breaking at this hour. A probe from a Republican lawmaker claims an Iraqi terror suspect is inside the U.S. after lying his way into the country. Just minutes ago, we got exclusive reaction from the Justice Department and the White House. Breaking details next. Breaking tonight, new calls for an investigation after an alleged Iraqi insurgent got into the U.S. as a refugee with a false ID. He was on the radar of the Joint Terrorism Task Force, and now some reports say he's gone missing. Just moments ago, we got reaction from the Justice Department and the White House. William Lajeunesse joins us now with the breaking details. Hi, William.
Well, Shannon, earlier this week, the chairman of the Senate Homeland Security Committee asked the Attorney General to explain how a suspected Iraqi surgeon got into the U.S. despite being vetted as a refugee and lying who he was. Republican Senator Ron Johnson, Wisconsin, wrote to the Attorney General after this Iraqi became the subject of an investigation by the Joint Terrorism Task Force in Texas. According to Johnson's letter, and I'm quoting, this individual allegedly fought against American troops as an insurgent in Iraq and at some point entered the country as a refugee under a false alias. Now, to get a positive ID, the JTTF tracked down a special forces operator who captured the Iraqi, who at one point boasted of killing U.S. troops. Yet he applied for and later received refugee status under this false name. Now, in response, the White House said today this statement, quote, President Trump has already taken several important steps to strengthen our national security, including the executive order he signed this week, which will put in place tougher vetting measures on foreign nationals from countries compromised by terrorism. Now, the Department of Homeland Security recently said nearly 1/3 of the 1,000 FBI domestic terrorism cases involve those admitted to the U.S. as refugees. The Attorney General's office refused comment, but said the matter is still under investigation. Back to you.
All right. Keep us updated because we know there's a lot more to this story, and we'll see how it ends up. Thanks, William.
Okay.
Here now to debate, Mark Thiessen is former chief speechwriter for President George W. Bush and a Fox News contributor. And Matt Bennett is co-founder of Third Way and former deputy assistant to President Clinton. Good to have you both with us.
Good to be here.
All right, Matt, does this beg the
you.
question that maybe our refugee vetting needs a little tweaking?
Look, we really don't know anything yet about whether this has any implications for policy or not. Senator Johnson's letter was not atypical. Members of Congress do this all the time. Somebody comes in as a whistleblower and they send a letter to the executive branch and say, we want an investigation on this. Sometimes where there's smoke, there's just people blowing smoke, and sometimes there's fire. So we don't know whether this is a real case of a refugee who's a radical or not. It might be. And if that's the case, it needs to be fully investigated in an independent way, which is the very thing that Democrats have been calling on Congress to do when it comes to Russia and other things.
Mark, and I would think that you would agree with that. The last point anyway, maybe not the first part, that this is an outlier of a case.
Yeah, it's not an outlier of a case. In fact, unfortunately, it happens all the time. So in 2015, the Obama State Department testified before Congress that the State Department had accidentally let in almost 10,000 people who later had their visas revoked retroactively because they either had engaged in terrorist activities or had ties to terror. 10,000 people. What that means is almost 10,000 people penetrated our defenses, beat our screening system, and got visas in the country, and then oops, the State Department figured out we got to revoke their visas. And then when Congressman Chaffetz asked the Obama State Department official, where are they? She said, I don't know. So we lost track of them. We don't know if they're in the United States. We don't know where they are. So this is a major problem in our screening system. Second point is that in last year, CNN and the Washington Post reported that there were 1,800 people who were supposed to be deported for posing national security threats, and instead they were granted citizenship. These are people who were that were considered too dangerous to enter the United States, and they accidentally gave them the right to vote instead of deporting them. So our screening system is deeply, deeply, deeply broken.
Well, Matt, do you think, we've got this pause now on refugees. The Syrian refugees are not singled out. It's a pause on all refugees, and we've got a ban on travel from other countries. For a while, is it worth taking this pause with all of those numbers and cases that Mark cites? Those are real people. And if we have 10,000 potential terrorist suspects running around this country that we don't know about or don't know where they are or exactly what they're capable of, can you be in favor of the pause? Maybe not, permanent bans, but some time to look at things and get some work done.
Look, Shannon, the problem, Mark was talking about a completely different thing. These weren't refugees that he was talking about. These were people coming in on different kinds of visas. The refugee system is actually incredibly rigorous. It takes 2 years. There's like a 20-step process that refugees have to go through. And the overwhelming majority of refugees are desperate people, many of them women and children. Many of them have fought with or served as translators for our troops on the battlefield and are living in enormous danger in some of these countries. So no, I don't think the pause makes any sense. And I
But
think
what do you make of the FBI's announcement this week that
Well,
of
the pause-
1,000 domestic cases of potential terrorism that they're looking at, 300, they say so that's a third of those cases are people who came here as refugees?
Well, there's a big difference between investigations and arrests.
True.
If you look at the data, the overwhelming majority of terrorist attacks in the United States, of which thankfully there have been very, very few, are from people who have lived in the United States, either were born here or were citizens or have lived here for a long time. People who come as refugees very, very rarely commit crimes. People that come as immigrants commit crimes in lower numbers than citizens. So this is not a serious problem, and it's not a good solution.
We're almost out of time, so I want to make sure I give Mark a quick final word here.
Sure, it's not only refugees that are part of the pause. It's other people who are with visas, and the fact is that we know that people who have come here on visas and fooled our screening system have carried out terrorist attacks. The woman in the San Bernardino shooting came here. She beat our screening procedure and killed 14 people. The underwear bomber in 2009, his father went to a U.S. embassy and said, "My son's a terrorist." They didn't revoke his visa. He came in and almost blew up a plane over Detroit. So our screening system needs to be fixed.
All right, Mark and Matt. Good to
All
hear
right,
from
Jen.
both of you. Thanks so much tonight. The reaction to today's Day Without Women protests and what some are calling their very confusing message. Women skipping work and in some cases leading to school closures to point out just how much they are needed. The day also quickly devolving from celebrating women to bashing President Trump.
Trump does not have respect for women. No, he doesn't. No. But he also doesn't know the power of women. By Trump and Republicans to diminish women, we know our value and we know that America doesn't function without us.
Katie Pavlich is a news editor at townhall.com and a Fox News contributor. And Kathy Aru is a liberal analyst and publisher of Catalina Magazine. Good to have you both with us.
Hi, Shannon.
All right, Kathy, I want to start with you. Is this more about promoting and celebrating women, or is this more of a continuation of the Women's March, which was clearly in Washington about saying, this is not our president, we want nothing to do with him, and he's terrible?
Well, actually, it is a continuation of the Women's March. They did say that this is the fourth largest event that they're planning, 4 out of 10 events.